York to study more about why these terrorism happen and these inequalities that's happening in the world. And that really got me interested in what can we do about this? What are the things that I can do in order to influence the current negative spiral of hatred and violence?
This is a podcast called Walk, Talk, Listen. An attempt to connect people and make this world a bit better by sharing opinions and experiences based on the belief that everyone's perspective is true, albeit partial. My name is Maurice Blom, and I would like to welcome you to yet another episode of Walk, Talk, Listen. Good day, everybody. This is another episode of the podcast Walk, Talk, Listen. And as always, I'm delighted with today's guest, who's a great colleague of mine for many years now. Takeshi, please go ahead.
Thank you. This is Takeshi speaking from Kobe, Japan. A little bit about myself. I've been working with Church World Service for quite a long time. I started out in Afghanistan back in 2004. Then worked in Pakistan, the Cyclone Nargis response in Myanmar, the massive flood response in Thailand, and the East Japan earthquake and tsunami in Japan in 2011. So I think all these disasters have taken me from place to place. And now after that, the triple disaster in Japan, we have CW Japan, which I lead currently.
Let me take you a couple of steps back. How did you get involved with this work? Because you said, yes, I know you from your work with CWS Pakistan, Afghanistan, but tell a little bit about, where did you grow up? You're saying you're based in Kobe. Were you born there as well? And, what did you study?
Well, from my childhood, my family have moved quite a lot. I think by my university time, I've moved maybe 13, 14 times, which includes my childhood days in Luxembourg, where I lived for about 5 years with the family. And then after that, I lived in Ohio State in the US.
Wow.
And went back to Japan in my high school days.
So what were your parents doing?
Well, my father was working for this company called Teijin, and they had this joint business in Luxembourg and Ohio with DuPont. And I think it was a factory making these films, like those black films in their cassette tapes and videotapes. And he was a finance guy. So he helped set up that operation in Luxembourg and Ohio. So that's what took us there.
Okay. And may I ask, so what did that life abroad do to you?
Many things.
Yeah.
Many things. So, well, first of all, I think it opened up my eyes to many things, including in Luxembourg. I went to American school in Luxembourg, and in one of the buildings of that campus, suddenly we had lots of refugees from Yugoslavia at that time because of the conflict that they had. And so we saw so many people that we haven't seen before. And there was really a desperation in their eyes. But as a child, I couldn't really understand, what was going on and what's behind these people moving into one of the buildings in our campus. But that was my exposure to these the human miseries that people are going through. And that kind of stuck in my heart while I was growing up. And the key moment that took me to this sector was actually 2001, 9/11. And I was doing this exchange program. I was in a university in Japan, but there was an exchange program with the universities in the US.
Mm-hmm.
So I was in the University of California in Santa Barbara on that day. And 9/11 happened, and everyone started to call me from Japan asking if I was okay. And they didn't understand whether I was in the East Coast or West Coast.
Mm-hmm.
But then I was studying international relations at that time. And the curriculum in UCSB changed completely, given that terrorist attack in New York, to study more about why these terrorism happen and these inequalities that's happening in the world. And that really got me interested in what can we do about this? You know, what are the things that I can do in order to influence the current negative spiral of hatred and violence? And working with NGO or for NGO with the people on the ground was one of the things I wanted to do. So after I went back to Japan, I started doing this internship with the one NGO in Japan, which had a partnership with Church War Service Operation in Afghanistan.
Okay.
They were financing the education program in Hazarajat at that time. So that's what got me connected to CWS, actually.
Great. Okay, I didn't know that. So thanks for sharing that, Takeshi. And I'm especially passionate about ensuring that people are better prepared, that as a world we are more resilient. So let's share about that work.
Since when I was in Afghanistan and Pakistan, I was in this team of disaster response. And we've been responding to various disasters at that time, recurrent floods, drought, earthquakes, and particularly when it comes to these climate-induced recurrent disasters like floods, we were facing with similar types of damage, similar types of losses by similar, or the same communities every year or once every 2-3 years. And then that got us thinking, how can we try to minimize loss from before disaster time? And that was our sort of entry into disaster risk reduction. I think it's maybe 2 decades ago or something like that, or close to 2 decades ago. And the reason why we're so passionate about disaster risk reduction and climate change adaptation is because, during disasters, we lose important things. Our jobs, for example, or sometimes our family, friends, important belongings, our assets, all these important things can be lost. But there is a science around these disasters that we say, sometimes hazards are just hazards. They are these vulnerabilities and exposure element that makes these hazards into disasters. So we have to make sure that the hazard don't become disasters for the people. We have to make sure that you can protect your loved ones. You protect yourself, protect your jobs, livelihood, the future, dreams. And one way of doing that for me is ensuring this disaster risk reduction, making sure that people understand the science of why hazards become disasters. And, there's an inherent capacity in all of us to protect ourselves and build upon that inherent capacity in each one of us to make sure that we're safe. And I think that can be done. And that makes me passionate about this disaster risk reduction.
Before I'm going to ask you, about what you are doing and what you have been doing in Japan, I would like to tell us a little bit about what you learned in Pakistan and Afghanistan, because there you had to work in difficult circumstances in another culture. what is, maybe one of the most important lessons that you learned of that, that particular period of working there?
Well, first of all, Afghanistan and Pakistan are, among my favorite countries in the world. I didn't really think of my time there as a hardship. Rather, it was a moment that I really cherish, full of learning. And one of the biggest learning that I had in my work there was, I sometimes compare my life in Japan as like a color picture, and the life I saw in Afghanistan was like a black and white picture, and like a monocolor picture. But I mean, I'm not saying that in a negative sense, because many professional photographers, they prefer to take these monocolored pictures, right, in order to emphasize on the message. Yeah. And what I learned in working in Afghanistan, Pakistan, was that essence in life, what's most important in life, and how the, I often got so caught up in unnecessary things, and not really focusing myself enough on what's most important in life. And, they taught me the importance of, for example, community. We say community, but community encompasses many things for us. The love, the relationship, the security, protection, and that mutual support, which we often need. But in our urban living style these days, I think we often forget that, the importance of community. But my experience there really taught me, emphasized how important that is. And I still have that as my core sort of belief and value when carrying out my work.
Okay. And, so you learned a lot in Afghanistan and Pakistan, and then suddenly something in your own country happened, and, take us through that journey, and then, what you started to do, because that's pretty, I think it's pretty great, because, lessons that you took from Pakistan, Afghanistan, you took from Japan, there, you were involved in many different types of organizations and responses. And now you're using that also to help CWS, not only within the region, but beyond that as well. So, okay, bring us back to Japan after Pakistan.
So on that day, March 11th, 2011, I was actually, at that time I was based in Bangkok in our CWS regional office, looking after the emergency program in Asian region. And I was on my way from Bangkok to Afghanistan on March 11th. And that's when I was packing, and I was about to head out to the airport. And I received a call from my wife-to-be, the current wife, that a massive earthquake has happened. And then when I went to the airport, I saw these images of tsunami being broadcasted on every TV screen in the Suvarnabhumi airport in Bangkok. And I was flying to the west, to Afghanistan, but I really wanted to fly to the east. But as the situation got revealed, it was clear that Japan, given all the capacity that Japan has, it was impossible for only Japan to respond to the humanitarian needs that happened, that emerged. So I think I spent in Kabul for about 2 days, and then I flew back to Japan and started the emergency operation with CWS and our partners in Japan, which eventually then we established our CWS office in Japan. One big learning from this response in Japan was that I was a local. It was really a realization at that time. I thought I was a professional aid worker until then, but I realized that I was not. What I mean is, I was always an expat, a foreigner. responding to emergencies in Afghanistan or Pakistan or Myanmar or Thailand. But then, and when you're a foreigner, not really speaking the local language, then there's sort of a wall between yourself and people affected community, right? You're only able to understand what's being translated to you. And there's always that sort of distance between yourself and the local community. But when I'm a local, I could go wherever I wanted to. I could speak with whoever I wanted to. I could understand when even people are moaning or crying. I understand that. So until my Japan response, I thought having that sort of artificial wall between myself and the affected communities was prerequisite to be a professional in our work. That's what I thought. Mm-hmm. But I realized that I was completely wrong in Japan. What I mean is, so you could understand everything that people are saying, what people are going through, and you receive those in a way. You have this empathy that you make yourself closer to those people. And I realized, if you continue to do that, then it really affects you psychologically, because all these miseries, hardship that people are going through will really affect your feelings as well. And it could affect your, psychology, your body. So you need to, but having that empathy, I thought, was prerequisite. Not having that artificial wall was prerequisite to be a professional aid worker, but having that empathy, which makes yourself closer to the people who are being affected, was the prerequisite. But if we're going to do that, we have to learn how to manage that accumulating sort of stress levels, and I thought that's the professionalism in what we do. It's not that you distance yourself from the affected community, but you go through it together. But then you have to make sure that you're resilient enough to be able to have that empathy.
So, that particular realization, does that mean that, if you would go back now to Pakistan, you would work differently?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. At that time, when I was based there, well, I was a young aid worker. I think, I was really a kid. I was learning a lot. But if I were to do it again in my, work that I used to do in Pakistan, Afghanistan, then I would put a lot more emphasis on, going through this process together, process of transformation, of facing these issues that the local communities are facing, and until having these solutions for these problems, go through each of the process together more with that community, and identify these local leaders and have them lead the process. And we become sort of a support role for that local leadership to flourish. So instead of just like distribution oriented aid work, but it's more about nurturing that local leadership aid work. I think through my tenure in CWS, I've matured in that way, that ultimately is that local leadership that will make a difference locally. And supporting that capacity on the ground is the best thing that the outside agencies like CWS can do. And so I think, and have, lots of empathy, the attitude of empathy during that process. I think that's what I would do if I go back now.
Okay. Takeshi, I mean, you hear a lot about, after a disaster, we need to ensure that we build back better. And I think inherent within that is, you need to ensure that it doesn't happen again. So, you need to build houses, earthquake resistance. You need to ensure that flooding is not happening, and then I think ultimately it goes to looking at climate change and, what we do to the world, right? How we are making this world more sustainable. Can you explain to us what take us, let's say, not in the actual response after the tsunami in Japan, but more like, okay, where you were working about already on at the future instead of the direct response. How did you do that? Because I think that's where your passion and that's where your work around DRR comes up, and not only in Japan, but you're trying to strengthen it also, within other organizations around the globe. So, yeah.
Well, for example, the international framework for disaster risk reduction that we have now is called Sendai Framework for the Disaster Risk Reduction, which was adopted in Sendai in 2015 in Japan. And there are 4 priorities of action. And the first priority for action is understanding the risks, which I think is so important because depending on where I live, depending on what sort of difficulties my family members have in daily lives, maybe difficulty walking, a difficulty in seeing, hearing, and my neighborhood sort of landscape. All these variables actually determine what kind of disaster risk I have. So disaster risk is not only about these physical, like, you live in the landslide prone area, you live in the flood inundation risk area. It's not only that physical element, but the variables that you have in your family, yourself, if you're taking these medicines that require you to take every day, that means that, if that stock runs out, then there is that vulnerability that you could face. So different people would have different risks. And I think COVID has revealed that even more because, some people do not show the symptoms, but some people have really severe symptoms. And we have a lot of people who passed away from that disaster, like global pandemic. And so understanding one's disaster risk, I think, is the first step towards any disaster risk reduction, disaster risk management work. And when you're faced with these hazards, even a flood or, the sediment disasters like, landslide or these the corruption collapse of these surface on the slope, it would happen again. It's not only a one-time hazard. Hazards always recur, whether it happens in every 10 years, 20 years, or 40 years, 50 years. Sometimes we have these floods that are happening every year, and drought and so on. So I think understanding one's risk is critical in trying to secure your assets, your life, your loved ones, community in this continuous risk that we have to live with. And this planet actually is breathing. This planet is moving. The plates are moving, the air is moving, our Mother Earth is living, actually, and disaster risk reduction is a method for us to live wisely, coexist, wisely with this planet's natural circulation. Of course, with the climate change that the humans are causing, I think many of this is not really a natural and it's human-made. But I think that disaster risk reduction is really how to coexist with this planet.
I would like to talk with you about then, COVID-19, I mean, which you mentioned. How did your country, Japan, respond to that? And were you also part of the response?
Japan has gone through. We're just at the end of our fifth wave. So we've gone through this 5 waves of COVID, pandemic, and we're fearing whether a 6th wave will happen this winter again or not. But these days, what's happening with because of the rate of vaccination has gone up. Many people in Japan are now vaccinated against COVID. And I think there is a little change in lifestyle as well. Many people are, not all, but many people are having these remote work style, including CWS actually. So it's like a hybrid model from now of, visiting office once in a while, but, working from home the other times. And we've realized that there are vulnerable people against COVID, and there are less vulnerable people. And to support those vulnerable people has been, the focus of the aid agencies in Japan as well, including the elderlies, And for example, CWS Japan has been also supporting our partners in Japan, but also have been doing this COVID response in Afghanistan, for example, also.
How did you do that with Afghanistan? Because there is a lot going on in that country as well. So,
well, there's a lot going on, but CWS has a partner there. The former Church World Service Pakistan Afghanistan office is Community World Service Asia, and CWS Japan has been working with Community World Service Asia for these emergency and disaster risk reduction work, both in Afghanistan and Pakistan. And so through that partnership, our assistance become possible, even in the current chaotic situation, which actually requires all hands on deck, because the winter is approaching for them. And the situation is so dire that, I hear about these mothers, for example, selling their children for the price of $300 to $400, because she has to feed other children. And there are people committing suicide because they can't stand the fact that they cannot feed their family anymore. They can't see their family dying in front of them. It's just too much. And traditionally in Afghanistan, people would have these reserves of either some cash, food, agricultural proceeds to prepare for this winter. This year, they have nothing. Many of the people in the government sector also not receiving salaries since July. And if winter approaches given the condition like this, we're going to see really a catastrophe. And we would like to avoid that as soon as possible. So we're also mobilizing our stakeholders in Japan and trying to do immediate cash assistance for people to go through this harsh winter that they're about to face,
So, but how do you get that done? Because I guess I think people think that because of the changes that are happening. I mean, we are all aware. We are seeing that the US and other countries are trying to fly out people, but we're also, of course, aware that the majority of the people that will remain in Afghanistan under another regime. So how do you get this done? I mean, is the banking system is still working?
There are lots of restrictions. There are lots of restrictions, like the bank, as you mentioned. There's a limitation to how much you can withdraw, for example, cash. individuals, you can only withdraw the maximum of $200. Some provinces becoming $150 per week. And organizations can only withdraw 5% of your deposits every week. And then I think there's a $5,000 cap of how much you can withdraw per week. However, there are mechanisms like, there are these like a mobile cash payments that you have in the US, we have in Japan, we have everywhere these days. That kind of services are also available in Afghanistan. And that industry would allow aid agencies like us to do cash transfer to the intended beneficiary or people that we're working with a minimum sort of administrative cost. And if we use that kind of mechanism, the cash assistance to those in need are possible. And if the assistance go through aid agencies with our partners, then the money doesn't really go to the government, but it goes to the people. And I think that's what's required for the world to do now. There's lots of political discussion, political consideration, but the Afghans who are staying in Afghanistan, they are the victims of all these changes, and they need to be supported. And we have the means to support them directly. And I think we should do more.
Takeshi, you know that this podcast is a spin-off of my 100-mile walk that I've been doing for the last 10 years. Well, actually, while we speak, that means tomorrow I will start my 100-mile, but this particular podcast will be broadcasted, if everything goes well, on the Wednesday, so then I'm 3 days in. So I walk 100 miles, 15 to 20 miles per day to raise awareness about hunger, poverty, and injustice. If you would be asked to walk 100 miles in a week, why would you do that?
Well, I think one is, I think it will be a good exercise, right? I think it will make you fit. But also, I think having that global solidarity, people who are walking in the US, other people who are walking in Asia, having the same cause and doing the joint sort of action together, I think it's a beautiful thing. At the end of the day, maybe you happen to be born in country A, then you're, so-and-so, the citizens of that country. I'm born in Japan, so I'm Japanese. That's something that we don't choose, right? We don't choose which country we are born. We don't where we come from. But what's the value that we are going to have and demonstrate in our life? It's something that we choose. So if we choose to connect, I think it's a beautiful thing.
I know you a little bit. I also know that you used to. I don't know how that is now. You only need a little bit of sleep because it's, you go until late and you wake up early. But when you wake up, in the morning, why do you get out of bed? What drives you in life?
What I get impressed the most or satisfies the most is when I see, feel, experience the sort of the inherent love that we have as a humanity. And I think it's actually all around. We can see it in our work as well, with the communities, with our partners. And again, that's the choice we make, right? We have the we have the freedom to make the choice of whether to express that feeling towards the people that you work with, or not. And I choose to express that as much as I can, because I think that's the most beautiful thing in life. And if I think like that, then every day is a beautiful beginning of, of such relationship. Um, and, by the way, since about like 3 years ago, I started to do this meditation every morning. And it's great because it's sort of the reflection of my own state. We often think about a lot of things, right? We think about what happened in the past. We think about what's going to happen in the future. But then I realized a lot of times I forget what's happening now. My state of the body now, my state of the mind now, which is actually the only factual thing that we can feel, right? And the factual thing that's actually going on right now. So through my meditation, I learned how to focus on the current, the now, what's happening now, and it's really working well for me.
And it's interesting, Takeshi, because when I walk with other people, because I sometimes joined by folks that would walk the whole day with me or a couple of miles, we often talk about this actually, which I would consider spirituality. And why are we on earth? What's the purpose? And then we talk about religion as well, and which maybe for some people is more the institutionalized form of spirituality, for others not. But what I'm interested in, and I try to discuss this with my guest, is what do you see within your community happening with young people and religion and spirituality? Is that different, to what you did when you were younger? What do you see? Can you share?
Sure. The community in Japan, I think majority of the people are not so practicing like religion practicing people. It's funny, in Japan, for example, in the New Year's, you go to a shrine. When it comes to these funerals, you have your graveyard in a temple. When it comes to wedding, you do it in the church. So I think people have these sort of acceptance in a way towards different religion, and I grew up in that kind of environment. So I'm sort of like that in a way that I respect all the religion that people believe. I think there's an inherent value in what people believe, and that itself I think is beautiful, and we need to respect what people believe. But a community like this needs to be built on like a strong philosophy, right? Japan traditionally, I think, has been exercising that strong philosophy in life. We're taught how to behave in the society by our parents, by our neighbors, in schools and so on. But these days, I feel like young people are looking up to the current adults who are making decisions in this society and are not feeling that philosophy being exercised. I think there's sometimes a disappointment that I feel from young people. We're hurting the climate, for example, the planet. And there are probably more that we can do, but the immediate things come as a priority rather than what's going to happen 50 years or 100 years later. And young people are starting to see that in the adults, and I think they get disappointed, and that's what makes me sad, because I think our generation should not disappoint our children's generation. Rather, I want my son is 6-year-old, by the way. I want his generation to think that we're doing our level best so that they can have a good life forward.
And what do you see then the younger generation doing with that disappointment? Are they taking actions themselves? And in Japan, because that's what I often heard, Takeshi, when we say here is, the younger generation, when talking about religion and spirituality, but especially maybe with institutionalized religion, disappointment is in church and in church bodies because of many things. Reasons are there, but then you see that the younger generation is very active, or a lot of young people are active around climate change, injustices, and speaking out, taking action, starting their own NGOs. Is that similar in Japan or not?
Well, I think traditionally, I don't think Japanese society has been very vocal about the things that we feel. There was an era that the people went out to demonstrate, and some of them becoming violent and all that. But I think these days that's not how things are done. But I think there are different ways of engagement. Like disengagement is also one form of engagement, right? So if young people loses trust in the current system, then maybe they may decide not to vote in the coming election because they don't want to support the system that's really, hurting our planet. If they don't have this trust in the system that we operate with, maybe they would reconsider about paying these taxes and be a responsible citizen. So I think that's an extreme form. Disengagement is extreme form, but I think like our generation, generations before us, need to think really about how to be more attractive as leaders in the society, so that the young people would want to engage, not that they have to engage, but they feel they're so motivated to engage. Provide that space so that they can flourish with their leadership.
I want to well, it has to do also with the younger generation, but it also has to do with our organization, Church World Service. We celebrate 75 years of existence, and the organization is looking at, did we do well? What did we do well and what not? What should we do better? A big discussion is around racial justice issues, diversity, inclusion. If you look at the NGO sector as a whole, so not only at CWS, but the NGO sector as a whole, what do you think? Did the NGO sector how did they do?
I see. Okay. I think these racial injustice is in many places, including where I live, in Asia, particularly when it comes to like ethnic minority issues, whether we see like a multi-ethnic country like Afghanistan or Myanmar, or sometimes in the Philippines, there are majority, there are minority in many countries. And what's happening with this minority community, that they're not able to receive the same entitlement as the others, it's not really being shown if the majority doesn't care about it, right? And there's that wall of sort of like autonomy of a nation that is difficult for international community to step into such matters. And during that time, I think it's the NGOs who can document, who can speak up, who can really let the society know what's happening around these issues. And I'm not talking about the Western NGOs only. I'm talking about the local NGOs as well. Civil society as a whole, I think, should play that role more and more. And we need to support the local civil society in doing that. Because oftentimes in such country, in such community or society, these people who are speaking up against these issues are facing difficulties, right? Sometimes facing security threats. Sometimes they feel alone. But I think the civil society is not only dictated by the country's boundary, but we have this global solidarity within the civil society for justice. And that needs to be apparent in action. And I think CWS is a kind of organization who try to be vocal and proactive on the justice issues as well.
Right. Yeah. Although we have a lot of conversations going on, and I do agree with you. There are certain things that we did do well. There are other things that we still have a long way to go. It's also very complex as well. But thanks for sharing, Kashi. I'm going to jump, to another topic, because music is very important to me, and I always, it makes me happy. It helps me when I'm sad. If I ask you to mention a song or a piece of music that embodies, for a big part, who you are, what song or piece of music would you then mention?
Imagine. It may be a cliche in questions like this, but the lyrics in that song, Imagine by John Lennon, I think it really captures how I want this world to be. I think we're divided in many instances by our differences. But if we just stop and try to think about it, we have more commonalities than differences as a human being with people around the world. And we don't really take time to cherish that. I think it's a beautiful thing that we have commonality with so many people. And what we imagine today, I think will influence our action tomorrow. And ultimately, what we're imagining is what we're going to achieve. So if we don't imagine, what we want, how we want to be, I don't think we will ever reach there. And so, lyrics in this song is really encompassing what I believe.
And just for I don't know if you're aware, but I've been asking not to all 60 guests that I have so far, but many. And I've made a Spotify a playlist actually of all those songs that my guests have mentioned. And so you have classical music, you have hard rock, heavy metal, R&B, Beatles. It's really interesting. And so I would really encourage you to check that out. And it's just it's fascinating that the songs people come up with. Hashtag Walk Talk Listen, and you'll find it on Spotify. Hey, those conversations always go far too fast, but so I've come to the last question, and that is any message, invitation, question that you might have for the listeners.
I think, and this is a message to everyone, but I think we're living in this era with such a increase in disaster risks around us. We're seeing these communities affected by, these heavy, massive typhoons or floodings and, forest fires and drought. And so there's also a study that around 1 in 5 people are going to experience a disaster in their lifetime. And that may actually be you, that may be me. Anyone could be going through that experience. And so, learning the disaster risks in your surrounding area, where you live, where you work, your commuting roads, and identifying the safe place to evacuate, and being alert on these signs of hazards. I think will save a lot of things. Will save your life, your loved ones, and your assets, and so on. And so, yeah, I mean, CWS will do its best in promoting more disaster risk reduction, climate change adaptation in this current era. But I think it's up to each individual. It's up to each one of us to make that decision, to take that action. And so if I may also call for such action by everyone to keep ourselves safer and our children generation safer, I think that would be wonderful.
No, thank you. And I really appreciate that, actually. And I know that there are our listeners as well, Takeshi, because there are so many issues out there, and people are often overwhelmed and then think, what can I do? And I think your advice in terms of, look in your own situation, how can you be better prepared? So that's one. Second, what you also mentioned, I think, in our conversation today is that, we have often more in common than we differ. And that's also actually the, basic premise of this podcast, is to show people that, hey, you have a lot of, perspectives out there, but there is always a possibility where you can start a dialogue, where you can learn from each other, and we can say, hey, we might not agree on everything, but there are pieces where we can work together, make this world a little bit better. So I really appreciate it. And then the third, what you said is, that there is a lot to be hopeful about. So at least that's what I heard you say. I really appreciate what you're doing. Continue what you do. It's great stuff. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me today, Maurice.
Right. Thank you for listening to Walk, Talk, Listen. Please check us out on 100mile.org or follow us on Facebook or Instagram. Walk is around the corner because I will be walking again from October 11 until 17, and you can support me, you can join. And the great thing is that when you support me, that thanks to the immense generosity of Restart Bank, we have received a matching grant of $2,500. And this means that every dollar you donate to the 100 Mile Hunger Walk will be doubled until we reach that goal. So please do it. But there are 9 other ways that you can support, this year's 100 Mile as well. See you soon.